hunters and mechanics trained to protect their villages. He gave them uniforms, boots, and pride. He told them, "You are the first line. You are the shield of the people." Across the border, presidents watched. Some were nervous. Some were inspired. In Mali and Niger, similar fires were burning. France was being pushed out across the Sahel. In courtrooms, judges threw away their black French robes. They wore local cotton now, Faso d'Anfani, the fabric of the land. A symbol that even the law now served the people, not Paris. But not all was glory. Attacks by armed groups continued. Markets burned. Roads were unsafe. Some cried, "Is this the freedom we wanted?" But others answered, "Yes, freedom is not comfort. It is struggle, and it is ours now." Traoré didn't give long speeches. He walked with few guards. He listened more than he spoke. At night, people told stories of him, of how he visited camps without warning, of how he ate with soldiers in the bush, of how he told a grieving mother, "Your son did not die for nothing." Foreign aid began to dry up. France pulled back its investments. Western media painted him as reckless, radical, or worse. But inside Burkina Faso, a new pride grew. Youths raised their fists. Elders nodded in approval. The country was poor, but it was awake. In a dusty classroom, a girl named Awa wrote an essay. "Before, I wanted to go to France. Now, I want to build Burkina Faso." That was the change. The winds were shifting. Across Africa, young people were watching. Traoré's name echoed from Senegal to Sudan. Was he a hero? A rebel? A target? Only time would answer. But for now, one thing was clear. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had done what many feared to do. He looked the old empire in the eye and said, "We are no longer yours." Captain Traoré sat alone one night, under the stars, on the rooftop of a government building. No guards, no aides, just him, a notebook, and the wind. He looked out over the city of Ouagadougou. The quiet streets, the flickering lights, the silence after a long day. He thought of Thomas Sankara, the bold leader who once dreamed of an Africa free from chains. Sankara had stood where he stood. He had fought the same fight. But Sankara was betrayed, not by enemies, but by those close to him. Traoré knew this truth. The real danger was not always foreign. Sometimes it sat beside you. The next morning, he addressed his ministers. "Do not steal," he said plainly. "If you came to get rich, leave now. The people are watching, and so am I." He made enemies that day. Some wore suits, others wore uniforms. Men who had power for years began to whisper in secret rooms. "He is young," they said. "He is reckless." But none dared move yet. The people still loved him. The army still followed him. One evening, a convoy was attacked near the border. 15 young soldiers died. Traoré flew there the same night. No camera crews, no press. He knelt beside the bodies, his hands shaking. One of the fallen was just 18, barely out of school. Traoré wept, quietly, alone. He stood up, wiped his face, and said to the officer beside him, "We need to train harder. We need better weapons. But most of all, we need unity. Burkina Faso is bleeding, and it is our duty to heal her." He increased military patrols. He strengthened ties with neighboring Mali and Niger, forming a new alliance. The alliance of Sahel states. One voice, one army, one goal. Protect their land from terrorism and foreign manipulation. But in the shadows, threats were growing. Reports came in, strange messages from outside, rumors of foreign plots, and pressure from diplomats. France had frozen assets. Some European nations began pushing for sanctions. A warning, a message. Traoré didn't flinch. He went to the village of Kaya and gave a speech to farmers and elders. "They can freeze money, but they cannot freeze our spirit. Let them come. We will plant our own food. We will defend our own homes. Let Burkina Faso stand, even if we stand alone." The crowd roared. Some wept. For the first time, they saw a president who looked like them, dressed like them, spoke like them. Not through translators or prepared speeches, but from the heart. In the capital, murals of him now showed him beside Sankara. Children started naming their sons Ibrahim. Street vendors sold t-shirts with his face. Songs were written. Poems were shared on WhatsApp. But deep down, Traoré knew the truth. Love today could turn to hate tomorrow. He moved with care. He watched his circle. He slept in different places. He trusted only a few. One day, a message reached him. A failed coup attempt. Quiet, swift. Plotted by officers who once called him brother. He acted fast. They were arrested. No torture, no killings. He spoke to the nation calmly. Yes, they tried, but they failed. Because the people are awake now. And no one can kill an idea whose time has come. That night, the skies over Ouagadougou were silent. But inside every home, a new fire burned. Not just hope, not just fear, but belief that maybe, just maybe, this time things would be different. But the road ahead was still long. The enemies were not just the terrorists in the forests. They were also the greedy men in suits, the foreign agents with briefcases, the smiling allies who hid daggers. Captain Ibrahim Traoré knew what he was up against. But he was not afraid. He had the people. He had the land. And more than anything, he had the courage to stand when others bowed. Months passed. The dry season came, and with it, harder times. Crops failed in some villages. Prices of goods rose. Foreign aid had not returned. But the people endured. Because for once, they were suffering with pride, not shame. They said to one another, "It is better to eat little in freedom than to eat full in chains." Captain Traoré continued moving across the country. Not by plane, but by road on rough, dusty paths. He visited schools, sat with local chiefs, and walked through markets where women shouted prices in loud voices. Some touched his shoulder and said, "Don't forget us." Others said nothing, just smiled with tears in their eyes. But far away, in air-conditioned rooms in Paris, Washington, and Brussels, meetings were happening. "He's becoming a symbol," said one diplomat. "If this spreads, we lose more than Burkina Faso." Reports showed growing youth movements across West Africa. In Senegal, Niger, Guinea, even Côte d'Ivoire, young men and women were holding up signs that said, "We are not your puppets." Many wore t-shirts with Traoré's face beside that of Sankara and Lumumba. This scared the old powers. And so the game changed. Money began to flow into the hands of journalists, influencers, and NGOs. The narrative shifted. Some Western outlets called Traoré a military dictator. Others said he was a Russian puppet. But in Burkina Faso, the people had eyes. They saw him walking barefoot in mosques. They saw him sweating under the sun with soldiers. They saw him sleeping in simple rooms during village visits. "He may fall," some said, "but he is ours." Then came the big event. A secret document leaked. A plan by foreign actors to destabilize the country using propaganda, bribes, and hidden militias. It was called Operation Shadow Rain. Traoré didn't hide it. He went live on national TV holding the paper in his hand. "We have seen this before," he said. "They kill our leaders, break our countries, then come back as saviors. Not this time. Not again." He paused, looked into the camera, and added, "To those hiding behind silence, choose now. The soil is watching." That night, fireworks exploded in parts of Ouagadougou. It wasn't a holiday. It was a warning and a celebration. The people knew the storm was coming. In response, Traoré made his boldest move yet. He announced a new Pan-African currency. Not the CFA franc, not the euro, but a new note backed by gold and natural resources. It would begin in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. France was furious. It was not just about money, it was about control. "You are digging your own grave," a European advisor told one of Traoré's ministers. The minister smiled and replied, "Then let us be buried in freedom." Meanwhile, attacks by armed groups increased. Bombings, ambushes, and kidnapping attempts returned with more force. Some believed they were funded by outsiders. Others thought it was desperation by extremists. Still, Traoré did not retreat. He launched new recruitment campaigns. He armed the villages. He created people's defense committees, Groups of young men and women trained to gather intelligence, protect water sources, and rebuild schools. He said, "Every village must be a shield. Every child must be a spark." But one day, a drone was spotted above a military base. It was not Burkina. It was foreign. No flag, no permission, no answers. The next day, a massive cyber attack hit the national internet systems. Banks froze. News stations went black. Chaos rippled through the capital. For 12 hours, the country was blind. Then, slowly, systems returned. Traoré came back on TV. Not angry, not shouting. Calm. "They will try everything," he said. "But we are not children of fear. We are children of fire." And with that, the real battle began. Captain Ibrahim Traoré began to sleep less. Each morning, he was briefed on more attacks, more rumors, more signs of betrayal. His face grew thinner, his eyes sharper. He didn't complain. He simply worked. But deep inside the presidential compound, there was unease. A few of his own ministers, the ones who once shouted "Patriot," had begun whispering in low voices. Some had secretly met with foreign diplomats. Some were promised land abroad, money, even safety for their families. They wanted to remove Traoré, quietly, quickly, before his new movement became too big to crush. They called it Plan Silence. But one of the soldiers overheard a coded message. He was just a guard, a boy from a village Traoré had once visited during the floods. The soldier remembered how Traoré carried rice sacks on his own back. So, without waiting, he wrote a note, folded it, and slipped it under Traoré's door. The next morning, Traoré said nothing. He smiled as usual, shook hands, gave orders. But that night, he summoned the 5 ministers in secret. He didn't accuse them. He simply said, "If you have a second God, go and serve him. But do not pretend to serve me." Silence filled the room. One minister broke into tears. Another begged. The third stayed cold, unmoved. Traoré gave them a choice: resign peacefully or face the people's court. 3 resigned. 2 were later tried. From that day, he changed his circle. He brought in young, unknown patriots, teachers, doctors, even a mechanic from the north. Men and women who had no foreign passports, no offshore accounts, no hunger for luxury. Just love for their country. The people noticed. The villages started guarding their own leaders. They would say, "If you are clean, come among us. If not, the soil will reject you." Meanwhile, across Africa, the alliance of Sahel states began to rise. Leaders from Mali and Niger stood beside Traoré at a massive public rally. They raised their hands and shouted, "We are not colonies." The crowd roared. Some wept. Others danced with joy. But this unity was a red line. In foreign capitals, decisions were made. Secret ones. Destabilize them. Came the orders. Use media, money, mercenaries, anything. Soon, a new enemy emerged. Not soldiers, not terrorists, but ghost militias, fighters with no flag, no face. They attacked villages, blaming the government. They filmed fake videos of massacres and spread them online. International pressure returned. Sanctions, threats. One morning, a bomb exploded near a school in Ouagadougou. Children died. The country mourned. Traoré went to the site himself. He knelt beside the debris. Then he stood up and said, "They have moved from lies to blood. But we will not bow. Burkina Faso is not afraid." He then announced something nobody expected. "We will form a Pan-African army. One flag, one command, one purpose." People cheered. Others trembled. Because now it was no longer just about Burkina Faso. It was about an idea that Africa could rise on its own terms. But as Traoré rose in power and respect, his greatest danger still sat in the shadows. A man he once trusted. A man with a smooth voice, hidden deals, and a growing army in the forest. He wasn't foreign. He was Burkinabe, and he wanted the throne. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. His name was Colonel Dumbi. Not many people knew his face. He didn't give speeches. He didn't appear on TV. But inside the army, inside old political circles, his name held weight. Before Traoré took power, Doumbé had been a respected strategist, trained abroad, decorated in silence. But when Traoré rose, Doumbé was sidelined. No special post, no grand title, just a quiet advisory role. To the public, Doumbé remained loyal. But in the dark, he was building something dangerous. He created a private force, a group of ex-soldiers, mercenaries, and spies. They trained in the forest, near the borders. No uniforms, no trace. They called themselves Les Silencieux, the Silent Ones. Their mission? To take Traoré down, not with guns alone, but with doubt. First, they leaked false reports. Traoré is sick. Traoré is hiding millions abroad. Traoré has signed secret Russian deals. They spread rumors in mosques, markets, schools. Then they planted fake evidence, photoshopped documents, fake audio recordings. The international media picked them up. Foreign leaders began to hesitate. Trust started to shake. Inside Burkina Faso, some youth groups started questioning. Is he really different? Or is this another actor in uniform? But Traoré didn't panic. He called a national gathering, open to farmers, students, elders, and workers. No fancy venue, just an open field under a wide baobab tree. Cameras were allowed. Questions were raw. He stood before them and said, "I will not rule with lies. If you no longer believe in me, I will step down today. But if we continue this fight, we walk it together, barefoot if we must." There was silence. Then an old woman from the crowd stood up. Her back was bent, her voice small. She said, "I have buried 3 sons in this struggle. If you leave now, let the ground open and take me too." The crowd erupted. "On rest, on lut, we stay, we fight." But back in the forest, Colonel Doumbé saw this as a challenge. He changed tactics. He kidnapped a known journalist, forced him to say on video that Traoré had ordered secret killings. The video went viral. Then he bombed a gold mine, blamed the government, and used it to turn foreign investors against Burkina Faso. The economy shook. Food prices soared. Traoré knew the next step would be worse. And he was right. One night, during a military meeting, a sniper bullet whizzed past his head. It shattered a window, missed him by inches. It was no accident. It was a message. But Traoré didn't flinch. He stood up slowly, picked up the shattered glass, held it to the light and said, "Let them shoot. Let them lie. As long as I breathe, Burkina Faso will not kneel." Then he gave the order, "Find Doumbé. Bring him in alive. Let the people hear his story." And so began the manhunt, through forests, deserts, and borderlands. But Doumbé was clever. He knew the terrain. He had foreign friends. And now he was planning something bigger than betrayal. He wanted to divide the army itself. He wanted civil war. The army was breaking. Colonel Doumbé's lies had worked. Some commanders were switching sides. Old loyalties were crumbling. Whispers of war filled the barracks. In the north, a full base turned against the government. Flags were burned. Radio stations taken. It felt like the beginning of the end. Captain Traoré sat alone that night. No guards, no aides, just him and the silence. He looked at an old photo of his mother. He remembered her words, "If the tree forgets its roots, the wind will carry it away." He whispered, "What do I do now?" Just then, a message came in. A young village boy, 15 years old, had stood in front of a rebel tank. No weapons, no shoes, just a torn shirt and bold eyes. He shouted, "If you fight our president, you fight the poor. You fight my dead father. You fight my future." The rebels paused. Some stepped back. One dropped his gun. That image spread like fire. Across Burkina Faso, across Africa, the boy became a symbol. Students in cities walked barefoot for peace. Market women banged their pots in support. Even some rebel soldiers broke ranks and returned to the capital. Traoré invited the boy to Ouagadougou. He asked him, "Why did you do it?" The boy shrugged, "Because we're tired of always starting over. We need to finish something for once." Traoré smiled and hugged him. And then, finally, the army captured Colonel Doumbé. No blood, no war, just justice. He was put on trial. The nation watched. When asked why he betrayed, Doumbé said, "I thought the world still belonged to men like me, not boys with dreams." The crowd was silent. Traoré didn't celebrate. He simply visited every region of the country after that. He listened. He learned. He rebuilt. In time, Burkina Faso became known not for war, but for hope. African youth came to train there. Farmers learned to trade without middlemen. Schools were built by villagers themselves. The country stood on its own feet, poor, yes, but proud. And that village boy, he got a scholarship, became a teacher, and each time he entered class, he told the same story. "I had no boots, but I had a voice, and that was enough." Leadership is not about power. It's about him. We walked into a small house, and there he was, my father. Thinner, weaker, older, but still my father. "My name is Daniel, and I want to tell you something important. I am freedom. We will not." They called him the People's Soldier. Captain Ibrahim Traoré was not a politician. He was a quiet man, a soldier from the northern lands of Burkina Faso, raised under a burning sun and trained in the art of war. His face was young, but his eyes carried the weight of a tired nation, a country drowning in corruption, insecurity, and foreign control. When the old leaders fell and the streets of Ouagadougou erupted in anger, Traoré did not hide. He stepped forward. He took the microphone, looked into the cameras, and said, "We have taken power because the people are suffering. We will not serve France. We will serve Burkina Faso." The people cheered. The air changed. For years, France had kept its hand on Burkina Faso, a former colony. French soldiers patrolled the land. French companies mined the gold, and French advisors whispered into the ears of politicians. But to the people, nothing had improved. The terrorists still killed. The land was still poor. And the youth, they were tired of begging in their own home. Traoré moved fast. He ordered French troops to leave their base. He told France to take back its ambassador. He stood on the soil of a free nation and said, "We are not your children." And France? France was angry. President Emmanuel Macron didn't hide it. He called African leaders ungrateful. And that word hit deep. Traoré responded, not with softness but with fire. "We will not be insulted," he said. "We buried our heroes for this freedom. We will not hand it back." Soon, 3 French diplomats were caught, accused of moving like spies, speaking with the wrong people, sending secret messages. Traoré ordered them out. No more explanations. No more apologies. The streets of Ouagadougou danced again. The people beat drums and waved Burkinabe flags. Children chanted his name. "Captain Traoré, Captain Traoré." But Traoré wasn't celebrating. He was preparing. He knew what history taught him, that African leaders who stood against the old powers didn't last long. Sankara, Lumumba, Gaddafi, their names ended in bullets. He knew they were watching. France, America, even his neighbors. But he didn't blink. He turned to Russia, not as a servant but as a man playing a new game. Russia reopened its embassy. Military trainers came, not in shadows like the West but in daylight. People whispered about Wagner, denied their presence, saying, "We do not need mercenaries. We have our own sons, our own warriors." He poured money into the volunteers for the defense of the homeland, young farmers, hunters, and mechanics trained to protect their villages. He gave them uniforms, boots, and pride. He told them, "You are the first line. You are the shield of the people." Across the border, presidents watched. Some were nervous. Some were inspired. In Mali and Niger, similar fires were burning. France was being pushed out across the Sahel. In courtrooms, judges threw away their black French robes. They wore local cotton now, Faso d'Anfani, the fabric of the land. A symbol that even the law now served the people, not Paris. But not all was glory. Attacks by armed groups continued. Markets burned. Roads were unsafe. Some cried, Is this the freedom we wanted? But others answered, yes, freedom is not comfort. It is struggle, and it is ours now. Traoré didn't give long speeches. He walked with few guards. He listened more than he spoke. At night, people told stories of him, of how he visited camps without warning, of how he ate with soldiers in the bush, of how he told a grieving mother, "Your son did not die for nothing." Foreign aid began to dry up. France pulled back its investments. Western media painted him as reckless, radical, or worse. But inside Burkina Faso, a new pride grew. Youths raised their fists. Elders nodded in approval. The country was poor, but it was awake. In a dusty classroom, a girl named Awa wrote an essay. Before, I wanted to go to France. Now, I want to build Burkina Faso. That was the change. The winds were shifting. Across Africa, young people were watching. Traoré's name echoed from Senegal to Sudan. Was he a hero? A rebel? A target? Only time would answer. But for now, one thing was clear. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had done what many feared to do. He looked the old empire in the eye and said, "We are no longer yours." Captain Traoré sat alone one night, under the stars, on the rooftop of a government building. No guards, no aides, just him, a notebook, and the wind. He looked out over the city of Ouagadougou, the quiet streets, the flickering lights, the silence after a long day. He thought of Thomas Sankara, the bold leader who once dreamed of an Africa free from chains. Sankara had stood where he stood. He had fought the same fight. But Sankara was betrayed, not by enemies, but by those close to him. Traoré knew this truth. The real danger was not always foreign. Sometimes it sat beside you. The next morning, he addressed his ministers. "Do not steal," he said plainly. "If you came to get rich, leave now. The people are watching, and so am I." He made enemies that day. Some wore suits, others wore uniforms. Men who had power for years began to whisper in secret rooms. "He is young," they said. "He is reckless." But none dared move yet. The people still loved him. The army still followed him. One evening, a convoy was attacked near the border. 15 young soldiers died. Traoré flew there the same night. No camera crews, no press. He knelt beside the bodies, his hands shaking. One of the fallen was just 18, barely out of school. Traoré wept, quietly, alone. He stood up, wiped his face, and said to the officer beside him, "We need to train harder. We need better weapons. But most of all, we need unity. Burkina Faso is bleeding, and it is our duty to heal her." He increased military patrols. He strengthened ties with neighboring Mali and Niger, forming a new alliance.